So, we had all this football to watch, and then in the Monday night game, and this is an ongoing story. So I do have to say that this is a Wednesday that we're shooting. This was 2 nights ago. This happened. All right, so it's not even 48 hours at this point. But yeah. So like after all that, and then fucking Damar Hamlin, the hit that if I showed it to you on a replay and didn't tell you what was coming next, you wouldn't even blink at the hit. The tackle, really. It was contact and then the tackle. Hamlin brought him down to the ground, completes the tackle, gets up and then passes out. Turns out it's a cardiac arrest, as everyone knows. And there's just the way I saw it explained I have no medical training. This may shock everyone hosting a podcast about cock. But there is a millisecond in the heartbeat where the right amount of force can just shut the entire goddamn system down. And it's like that 1 in a million convergence, and that's what happened, apparently. Okay, what they know as of now, again, 48 hours out here, our information, leads to the cardiac arrest. And Kevin brought it up before, where the resuscitation is happening live on the field in front of 70,000 fans and all the players.
And the thing is, if you've ever cardiac resuscitation, like CPR, number one, you would have had to have, because you couldn't see, you've got to get his shoulder pads off him. You've got to cut the jersey. You've got to cut the strap. I mean, you've got to get his
under the pads.
Yeah. And then now, and then it's a very violent, and I mean, they crack ribs. It's to compress the heart with a human body. It's violent. It's something I saw it as close up as you can possibly see it. And it's those guys, the post-traumatic stress that I have, I know that I share with every one of those guys on the field. Like that's their brother, that's their, and if you're on the other team, anytime somebody gets hurt in a sport that you do, it's always you, because you know that it could have just as easily been you. And it took so long. I mean, and I go crazy because maybe I'm so close to this, not even 3 months out from my son having a cardiac arrest. But it's like, it just seems like they were so slow. Even driving the ambulance out of the field, it was like they were going 3 miles an hour. Like everything they did just seemed so slow. And you would think that the ambulance that's in the tunnel would be basically a trauma unit. I mean,
well, the doctors, the personnel that go out onto the field, it's not just the ambulance crew. They have, the club physicians for each team.
But are they, most of those guys are orthos. Those guys are orthopedics, man. You don't have it. I would like to know how many teams have a cardiologist on the field.
I don't know if that's a requirement to be in the building or not. I don't know.
It should be.
Yeah.
It should be now.
Is it possible, like, do they need to, and again, you have the most unfortunate firsthand be able to talk about this, but before you can lift and stretcher and load
You've got to get the heart started.
I was going to say that it probably has to be at a certain place where they say, okay, we have 15 seconds, we can do this now. but they can't get off him.
Well,
once you
put the defibrillation on, and you say clear, everybody clears, and they send the electric jolt, because that's what happened is the heart is stopped and it needs the electric current to go back through it. And my son, they gave him, he didn't even, you see it on those things where on the movies, and the person does the jolt. My son didn't jolt or anything. They gave him and they were just kind of like, it wasn't paddles. It was like strips, like a stick-on strip that you would put on a TENS unit almost. And they gave him a jolt, and immediately I could see the arrhythmia, but I could also read on the top of it that he was still in AFib. So even though he had a pulse, he was still in AFib. And he was in AFib until we got him to ICU, and then he had some kind of blood, whether it was his esophagus or an ulcer. He had some kind of blood. They were pumping blood out of his stomach, and I saw where Hamlin, they had some blood in his lungs.
From the compressions, maybe, right? Because
you never know. I mean, it's just so you don't know. Of course, he's so much healthier than my son was. But you would think, and I'm sure that going to the University of Cincinnati Trauma Center, but Halifax Trauma Center, that's where they brought Earnhardt. I mean, it's a good trauma center, but you would think that they would have a portable CT unit where they didn't have to, but if somebody's in critical condition, should be able to put a CT unit over the top of them and get a reading. And they didn't have that at Halifax. And you couldn't have put him on another stretcher and moved him with 95 things hooked up to him. So
a CT scan to be able to
see what fuck
damage.
Yeah. What are we dealing with? Because if you look at it slowly, that, the blow that he hits, their shoulder pads are so short now that, I mean, your heart goes to here. So if that blow was under this way,
mm-hmm.
I mean, you're basically getting that whole bottom of the heart. And that's what happens is, like, my son's, even though they got him back up, he was like 70 over 55, where I would be 70 over 112, 120, whatever. Like, they never could get his
blood pressure.
It was never, his heart muscle
right.
was damaged to the point where it wasn't pushing enough blood. And they were trying to find different things to get the bleeding stopped. That was eternally, and finally they did, because it's, they had a tube in his mouth, and it stopped taking blood out. But at that point, I mean, it's like, his heart, like, when your heart's that damaged for that long, they put Hamlin in a coma.
Yeah.
He was medically induced. And and I think one of the things they can do is they can chill the body. My son's body was already going so cold, they had to go the opposite way and put basically like a heating to heat the body. So, but for his parents right now, who are sitting there and watching that respirator breathe for their child, it's just like, I mean, it was almost like it happened at 9 o'clock at night. My son happened at 10 o'clock in the morning. So we had, like, my wife and I kind of were figuring out, where he would be, and the fact that he made it past, the second day is good. I believe,
The last update I have here is
his uncle's name is Dorian Glenn, and his name is Dorian Glenn. This was 2 hours before we came on tonight, and he said his uncle said he seemed to be trending upwards.
the last thing I saw, they were able to lower the oxygen delivery from 100% to 50. So he's breathing at a 50% capacity, which prior to that he needed. I mean, he was
Right.
breathing for him at 100%. So that's certainly a good indication.
And now the thing is, and I don't want to be, but I think that the next thing we were dealt with was when we sat down with the trauma people, was how long was the brain starved for the proper amount of
Of oxygen.
right.